The rule wasn't written down anywhere, but you could feel it in the way the conversation shifted the moment her name came up. Not Leonor, the person who might stand next to her one day. And suddenly, everything got stricter, more careful, almost like there are invisible conditions already in place, long before any relationship becomes public. And if you really think about it, that makes sense. Because when you're talking about Princess Leonor, you're not just talking about a relationship. You're talking about the future of an institution. So let me walk you through this in a way most people won't. Not headlines, not fairy tales, but the 3 real requirements I believe King Felipe VI quietly expects from anyone who gets close to Leonor. And trust me, these aren't small. Requirement number 1, you don't join the system, you disappear into it. Let's start with the hardest one. Because this is where most people would fail, not publicly, but internally. The first requirement isn't about status. It's not even about background. It's about identity. If you step into Leonor's world, your personal identity becomes secondary. Your opinions, filtered. Your lifestyle, adjusted. Your visibility, controlled. And here's my honest take. That's not something you learn overnight. That's something you either accept, or quietly struggle with forever. Now compare that to someone like Kate Middleton. Her transition worked because she didn't fight the system, she aligned with it so smoothly that the public barely noticed the shift. But that kind of alignment, it's rare, and it's not easy. 45-second mark, CTA, natural insert. If you're new to Leonor's story, subscribe, I post every day. Because understanding her future isn't about waiting for announcements, it's about reading the patterns before they're made official. Requirement number 2, zero risk to the crown, and I mean zero. This one sounds obvious, but it's deeper than people think. It's not just, no scandals. It's no unpredictability. Because unpredictability is the one thing institutions like this cannot afford. So anyone around Leonor has to be consistent, measured, almost predictable under pressure. And let me be real with you. That's a very different standard from normal life. In real life, being interesting often means being unpredictable. In royal life, that's a liability. Here's where my hot take comes in. I don't think the system is looking for someone exciting. I think it's looking for someone stable enough to never become the story. And that's a completely different kind of person. The Mr. Beast comparison, stay with me. This might sound random, but it actually explains everything. Look at Mr. Beast, every person in his circle plays a role that supports the bigger brand. Nobody disrupts the core narrative. Now imagine that, but with a monarchy. Except instead of content, it's national identity. So if someone enters Leonor's life, they're not just a partner. They're part of the structure. And structures don't tolerate instability. Requirement number 3, loyalty to the institution, not just to Leonor. This is the one people underestimate the most. Because it sounds emotional, but it's actually strategic. It's not enough to care about Leonor. You have to respect, and protect, the institution she represents. Even when it's difficult. Even when it feels unfair. Even when it limits your own freedom. And that's where things get complicated. Because love is personal, but monarchy, that's institutional. And when those two collide, the institution always wins. My personal thought, human marker. I'll be honest, this is the part that always makes me pause. Because I keep asking myself, can someone truly be themselves in that kind of environment? Or do they slowly become what the system needs them to be? And I don't have a clean answer to that. Why these requirements feel stricter right now? Here's something I don't think people are talking about enough. The timing. As Leonor moves closer to her future role, the margin for error shrinks. Everything becomes more serious, more permanent. So naturally, the expectations around her future partner, they tighten, not publicly, but definitely internally. The hidden cost no one mentions. Let's be honest about this. These requirements don't just filter people out. They shape the kind of relationship that's even possible. Less spontaneous, more structured, more observed. And that changes everything. Because a relationship like that, it doesn't just exist between two people. It exists under constant evaluation. The contrast that explains everything. Again, look at Kate Middleton. Her success inside the royal system came from long-term alignment. Time, patience, adaptation. Now imagine someone trying to enter Leonor's life without that same level of preparation. It wouldn't just be difficult. It would be almost impossible. So what does this mean for Leonor? It means her future isn't just about who she chooses. It's about who the system can accept. And those two things, they don't always match. Final reflection, let it sit with them. So here's the question I keep coming back to. Are these requirements protecting Leonor's future? Or limiting it? Because depending on how you see it, this is either stability at its highest level, or control at its most subtle. And maybe the truth is somewhere in between. And here's where it gets even more real, because once you understand those three requirements, you start to realize something slightly uncomfortable. It's not just hard to meet them. It's hard to stay within them over time. The long-term test, nobody talks about. Because anyone can look composed for a few months. Anyone can follow the rules when everything is new. But years, under pressure, with cameras watching, expectations rising, and every small mistake amplified. That's a completely different game. And I think this is where King Felipe VI becomes less of a father and more of a gatekeeper. Not emotionally, structurally. Because his role isn't just to support Leonor. It's to protect the continuity of everything she represents. Let me ask you something honestly. Would you sign up for that? Not the title, not the attention, but the conditions, where every decision you make is measured not just by how it affects your life, but how it affects a centuries-old institution. Because that's the reality behind all of this. And I don't think most people fully sit with that part. The subtle screening process. Here's something I've been thinking about a lot. What if the requirements aren't just expectations? What if they're filters, not announced, not explained, but quietly applied over time? Who can handle public silence? Who reacts under pressure? Who adapts, and who resists? And the thing is, you wouldn't even know you're being evaluated. It would just feel like life getting harder. My personal take, human marker. I'll be honest with you again, this part makes me rethink the whole idea of royal relationships. Because from the outside, it looks like romance. But from the inside, it feels more like selection. Careful, slow, almost invisible selection. And that changes how you see everything. Where Princess Leonor fits into this. Because we've been focusing a lot on the future partner. But what about Leonor herself? She's not just waiting for someone to meet these standards. She's also living inside them. Which means, she understands the cost better than anyone else. And that might influence her choices more than we realize. The internal conflict nobody sees. Here's something I don't think gets talked about enough. What happens when personal connection doesn't perfectly match institutional expectations? That's where things get complicated. Because then it's not just about compatibility between two people. It's about compatibility between a person and a system. And those aren't the same thing. The Kate Middleton comparison, final layer. When you look at Kate Middleton, what you're really seeing is the end result of that filtering process. But what people don't see is how long it took. How much adjustment was required. How many invisible expectations had to be met along the way. So when people say, why can't it just be simple for Leonor? I think the honest answer is, it was never designed to be simple. The risk of getting it wrong. Now let's take this one step further. What happens if the system does get it wrong? If someone is accepted, but doesn't fully adapt? That's not just a personal issue. That becomes a public one. And history has shown, those situations don't end quietly. So from the system's perspective, it's better to be extremely selective than to deal with the consequences later. The Mr. Beast parallel, one last insight. Think about how Mr. Beast builds his team. It's not just about talent. It's about consistency, trust, alignment with the long-term vision. Now scale that up to a monarchy. The stakes are higher, the margin for error is smaller, and the expectations, way stricter. So what should we be watching? Not announcements, not headlines, but patterns. Who appears consistently around Leonor? Who quietly disappears? How interactions are framed? What feels natural, and what feels managed? Because those small details, they reveal the real story. Final reflection, let it stay with them. So here's what I'll leave you with. Do you think these 3 requirements are about finding the right person for Leonor? Or about ensuring that whoever enters her life fits the system before they ever truly fit her? Because if it's the second one, then this isn't just a love story waiting to happen. It's a process. A very controlled one. And once you see it like that, you start watching everything differently. And trust me, this part of her story, we're only just beginning to understand it.